For me, this is probably one of the hardest parts of the application, just because a lot of us apply to a lot of different schools and there's a lot of high volume. A lot of us are working, volunteering, etc. So I really wanted to give you this space to navigate secondaries and give you guys our best tips. And we have some really cool panelists here today to talk about their personal experience and answer any questions. So I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Michaela, and I'll pass it over to Abena.
Hi, I'm Abena. I'm a first-year medical student, and with Michaela, we run the application essay feedback initiative. And so, I mean, we'll have the link later on, but if you guys are needing any reviewing or editing help, please submit a request through that link.
I can go next. My name is Amelia. I have been with my mentors for about a year now, and I super love it. I'm like a peer advisor, and I meet with pre-meds and we talk about the application process, and it's a ton of fun. Excited to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Reza. I'm a fourth year medical student. Sorry, I'm driving back from clinic, so I'll be available in a few minutes, but excited to be here and answer your questions.
Hi everyone, I'm Anthony. I'm also a first year medical student and also happy to be here.
Thank you guys for introducing yourself. So I'll go ahead and get started. Dramatic pause. Okay, so the most important thing for secondaries is staying organized. It's hard to keep track of all the different schools that you're applying to, when you receive interviews, when you submitted, and from my own experience, there have been schools where I have written the entire secondary and forgotten to submit it, or just something slipped through the cracks. So I think making a spreadsheet is the best way to do this and kind of track as you go. So this is a good model here. I'll just go through it a little bit. So you can write down all the different schools you're applying to, when you receive the secondary, which is important because we'll talk about this later, but you want to get those secondaries back as soon as you can, about a 1 to 2 week turnaround, since a lot of the schools are rolling admission, meaning that it's like first come, first serve. And I have noted from personal experience that when I applied my second time and I was more on top of the dates, I obviously did better. And luckily I'm here at UCLA with these beautiful people. So important to keep track of those when you received it. And then the deadline here, again, you don't really want to go based off the deadline because you want to really be submitting it 1 to 2 weeks after you receive it. And then you're going to want to put when you submitted it, any updates that the school sends you. I can't think of any on the top of my head that I received. And then you would put when you would be interviewing, and you can even put the links to the application, because I would have to go back to my email and then click the link for the school, and that's just kind of annoying. So just copy and paste the link right into this little neat sheet here, and then you won't have to worry about that. So the next part we'll talk about is pre-writing or not pre-writing. I'm biased. I am the opposite of a procrastinator. So I like to just do things like as soon as I get them. So I'll talk about the pros and cons. So the pros of pre-writing is that you can, submit it almost a day or two within receiving a secondary. And I think for me, I liked planning because I was working at the time and I had like 2 weeks off from work. So that was when I pre-wrote 40 secondaries for all the different schools. And because I was so dedicated during that time, I was able to continue working. So I think there's definitely some pros to it. And then the cons would be that, of course, yourself the best. So some people are really good at working under time pressure. So just, whatever works best for you. But if the worst thing that can happen is getting all the secondaries at once and you're starting from scratch. That can be really overwhelming. So that's just, the pros and cons of that. Panelists, did anyone not pre-write? Okay. Any like words you guys want to say about like how it was to not pre-write, or what you guys recommend?
100% pre-write, please. I did not pre-write by choice. Everything happened kind of last minute for me. And it was very stressful. But you'll see if you started receiving secondaries that there are a lot of common themes, and Michaela's going to go over them. And so if you can get a head start writing, just putting ideas together, like your experiences, what is most meaningful to you to write about. If you can just start jotting things down, it would make your life so much easier when you're receiving, when they start really like showing up in your mailbox all together. So
thank you.
I'm also firmly in the pre-writing camp, just because I really have seen that this is an iterative process. And as much as you know your own experiences, and you know exactly the stories you want to tell, but picking the way you want to say it and the way you want to reflect on it is very iterative. So you'll do your first draft. It probably won't be the draft you submit, and just pre-writing that front loads a lot of that work. So I'm hugely in the pre-writing camp, but also recognizing that you don't have to be married to what you wrote before, but just recognizing that you're doing the mental work of reflecting and sort of getting set up for your secondaries, so that you're already kind of in the zone when those prompts start rolling in.
I also agree with what everyone said. I encourage you all to pre-write at least the top 10 most common essays that medical schools ask. There is a diversity essay, there is an adversity essay, there is like the most unique experience you've had, like in your clubs, bunch of those, and then try to write with the longest prompt. So some of them are like 750 to 1,000 character. That way, when the secondaries come in, and if they're shorter than, if they're like 200, 300 characters, you can just cut those and just submit as soon as possible. And if they're longer, you've already written it. So it helps a lot in your process. It makes it a lot faster.
Yeah, that's a great point, Reza. I think if you're not able to pre-write like every single secondary, you can at least focus on the most common ones or the most long prompts. And pre-writing also gives you a chance to get feedback. Whereas if you're like working under a time crunch, you might not be able to get like your best friend to edit your essay at 2 a.m. or something like that. Okay, and we'll go over the main prompts as Reza was kind of alluding to. Okay. So some good things you can do to, like, how do you basically find the prompts? Ben is gonna send a link into the chat. The one that I used was the infamous Student Doctor Network, which I only went on for the prompts. But they have every single prompt for every single school that was used from the previous cycle. And most schools do use the same prompts. So it's really, really helpful because you can start pre-writing. Some cons is that, of course, the prompt can change. During my cycle, there was a lot more questions about the impact of COVID. But luckily, like, I think there was not too many that I had to like write up on the spot. Other things you can do is look at different school websites. You can also talk to current students, such as all of us here. So I think those are the best resources.
Okay, well, I think we have a question in the chat. I don't know if you want us to address them now or later.
But we can do it now.
Okay, I'll read it out. What's the best way to tackle how to answer the why ask question for each school? I have so far been using the mission statements in the school's website and my own value/experience to answer these, but are there any other tips? Actually, I think we can wait till the end for this.
Yeah. So we're gonna go over the strategies for all these different types of prompts that I'm going to go over right now. But thank you.
And Amalia's answering.
With that?
Amalia's answering.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. Okay, so the first a typical question is basically like what makes you diverse or what makes you unique. And right now I'm just going to go over the different prompts and then we're going to dive into different ways to tackle this question. Another common one is talking about adversity. So a time that you failed or overcame something difficult. A third one, the quite long prompts that Reza was mentioning can typically be like an autobiography, which is rough because you kind of already wrote a personal statement. The school that usually does this is UC San Diego, which is my alma mater, but it's a lot of fun to write that one again. The next one is why school X. So why have you chosen to apply to UCLA would be an example. Optional is use this space to detail anything else you wish, which always gives me a lot of anxiety because I don't know what they want me to put there, but we'll go over some things that you can do there. And then another one is if you were in blank scenario, how would you react? So this could be like an ethical scenario. It could be like a personality-based question. And then the last one is unpredictable miscellaneous prompt. Okay, so the diversity essay is basically getting at like what makes you be able to reach certain patient populations that others can't, and what kind of strengths are you going to have as a future physician that maybe your colleagues won't have. And I can speak from experience that all my classmates, we all have such different experiences. They're all amazing, but beautiful in their own way. So the best thing that you can do here is don't think about what they want to hear, you know, think about who you really are, because it's going to be more genuine if you're talking about your real life experiences. Something that can help is, you know, talking to a friend, talking to your mom, your parents, and asking them kind of what makes you different. Oops, sorry about that. So some common things that people do. For me, I talked about experiences with mental health. One of my close family members had a mental illness. So I talked about how having that background that I would be able to advocate and work with patients with mental illness. And then panelists, feel free to chip in with what you guys talked about.
I can go first. So I think that like one thing to consider is that when like we think about diversity, you know, like the very stereotypical way to think of this prompt is like, oh, my cultural background, my like my ethnicity, my racial background. A lot of people get really stuck on like that being like the thing that makes them diverse. But like as Michaela said, it's not about like what you think that they want to hear. I think that diversity means a lot of different things. And I think that like one thing that really grounded me when I was answering this is like, oh, what are the facets of my identity that I really value that make me like who I am? And so like, you know, that can be race, ethnicity, that can be all those different things, but it can also be, you know, like your other qualities in life. Like I really enjoyed teaching, so I actually used the diversity essay to talk about my diverse teaching experiences and how I could bring that to the medical school. So like these are all things that like make you who you are, and I think it's just like asking yourself like what parts of your identity do you value the most, and like what would you be the most passionate to talk about, and like what experiences have you had that really back up those parts of your identity. And I think like those just thinking about identity as a very like abstract concept helped me.
The other thing I want to add is with this diversity essay as don't fall in the trap of trying to come up with something that makes you the most unique person. It doesn't have to be that. You don't have to come up with an answer that makes you the only person in the world that has that. It could be literally if you volunteered in Red Cross and you did something cool with the Red Cross, you're just trying to tell the medical school, hey, I'm going to bring this into the medical school. It's something that maybe a couple of other medical students or a couple of other applicants have done, but I have done it too. And it's something that not everyone has done. It's something that makes you unique, but it doesn't have to make you like, it doesn't have to be only specific to you.
And something that I'll add is like, I urge you to reflect on the value of diversity and like why would a school want a diverse student body, and like why as an aspiring med student and an eventual physician do you want to learn and work in a place that's diverse, and use that as the foundation for why your unique life experiences lend well to that value. Because I think also the point of this is like, not everybody, like Reza said, like you can't, not if everybody is like the most unique, then like no one is the most unique. So like ultimately they're looking for people who understand why diversity is important and why like why it's important. And I don't want to like put words in your mouth, so like I won't give you my own reflections, but like I have lots of thoughts on this, so like feel free to reach out personally if you like want to hear more. But yeah, like talking more broadly about what you've learned and what you've seen is just as important as like who you are. But of course I would put in a lot of your identity, because that is what makes you unique, and that is important.
Thank you guys for sharing. I think all in all, like we were saying, it's not really about the actual thing itself, but kind of what you learned from it and how it's going to make you a better physician. So don't feel too much pressure to come up with something unique or not genuine. The next one here, we're going to talk about the adversity prompt. So again, that would be describing something difficult that you've overcome, a challenge that you faced. And the main thing that you really want to expand on is how you responded. And I added this part here, how it felt, because the admissions team they're reading so many essays, and let's just use like our science knowledge of that. Things that are emotional, people really remember, they really stick with you. And you want to be like the person that they remember your essay. And a really good way to do that is to actually describe like how you felt during that experience. And the last part, what lessons did you learn? And as Amelia mentioned, you always want to bring it back to how that's going to make you a better student and doctor. So examples here could be overcoming stress, maybe working through athletics or music. It can be major life events, but if you haven't had major life events, that's also okay too. For me, I talked about the passing of a family member. You can talk about a health issue that you've had or moving locations. I would steer away from talking about grades or the MCAT, because it's really not about academic adversity per se. It's kind of like personal challenge to get a little bit more of like personality from you. Panelists, feel free to chip in.
I think I would also, oh, go ahead, Amelia.
I'm so sorry, Avina, thank you. I was just gonna say, just kind of like the last prompt, don't feel like this is where you have to like demonstrate that what you've gone through is the most challenging thing. I think a lot of people can get very stressed about how their adversity might not be as adversarial as somebody else's adversity. And I just don't want you to fall into that trap. As long as you're demonstrating, you know, if something was hard for you, it was an adversity. And I wouldn't compare to like what somebody else might have gone through. Ultimately focus on how it felt for you, how you overcame it. And something that I really like to do with these prompts is to look at what are they really trying to ask. Put yourself in the position of the AdCom and be like, if I were to receive an essay on this, what would I want to glean from somebody's essay? And it's not necessarily that you want somebody to have gone through something terrible. What you are actually looking for is, have they gone through adversity before? Do they know how to deal with it? And what are their stress coping mechanisms? Because med school is hard and ultimately medicine is hard. And are they coming in with the tools to be able to handle that? Or not. And so if you focus on that and you're mostly reflecting on how your experience felt for you and what your stress coping mechanisms are, this is a good essay.
Yeah, Amelia, beautifully put. I was going to say something along those lines, but also whenever you're writing any of these essays, just remember that honestly, you are in charge of what you're writing. So make sure it's communicating what you want it to communicate. Um, don't write what you think, and again, has been already emphasized, but don't necessarily write what you think AdCom wants to hear, but like take charge of what you're writing. And if you're writing an adversity essay, what do you want to shine through about you? Like that's what you should be focusing on. And what traits and attributes do you want them to like notice in you? So I think with that in mind, and obviously everything else that the panelists have said, you should have a really reflective, introspective adversity essay that really like I guess puts you on the map.
Okay, thanks guys. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next one. So the autobiography is basically like a second personal statement, going through major life events and experiences that got you up to this point. So our best idea is like basically like when you're journaling, you don't want to be too I don't know what the word is, like monitoring what you're writing too much. You kind of just want to let your pen flow through the paper, or if you're typing, it's for example, so just write down everything kind of without judgment and kind of see where that lands you. So you can talk about your childhood, your hobbies, your family life, just pivotal moments in your life. And then either later that day, the next day, go through what you wrote and kind of circle a couple of themes. So for example, one thing that you might notice is that you continually like put yourself in someone else's shoes or something like that. And you can pull like 3 main themes from those different memories that you wrote about and kind of tie it into how that made you want to go into medicine. Hope that makes sense. Panelists, feel free to chip in.
Sorry, I feel like I've been talking a lot, but my 2 cents on this can be sometimes different. I know where this is a secondaries workshop. For me, the most difficult thing was I feel like I poured all of myself into the personal statement, and then making another, almost like another personal statement was really tough for me. And I did want to take advantage of this extra word count and give them something that was more than just my personal statement, which was very, very difficult. So which is why I just want to echo the like written rant part of it. I want you to just feel like that's a normal feeling, and recognize that it's not easy to essentially do that process twice, like write a personal statement and then another autobiography. Something that I want to just give you a little tip on is like, there are themes that you hopefully set up in your personal statement. It is totally okay to repeat those themes. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And in fact, they don't want to see like a whole nother applicant. They like you in your personal statement. They want to see you as an applicant. So feel free to repeat those themes. Just try to think of like other stories that demonstrate those themes, or perhaps different spins on stories you've already told, or go deeper and give a more nuanced reflection, because they already have your personal statement and now this extra word count of your autobiography. So feel free to like use this as, I almost thought of it as like an extension to like better explain a lot of what I was trying to say in my personal statement. And I think it worked out for me. Not everybody worked out that way, but that's just how I approached it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on unless someone else has anything else they want to add. And then quick round of applause for Amelia, who has to step out right now. But she mentioned that you can reach out to her for assistance, and I can affirm that she is extremely lovely and will definitely help you. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you all.
So next common prompt is why school X? And you want to think about what makes this institution the best fit for you. The most common mistake that I see applicants make is not being specific enough. So I like to think about it as if you were going on a date, and someone was like, well, I like you because you're a girl or something like that, that's not really going to make that person kind of like want to continue dating you or seeing you. It's very flattering when I say like, Abena, I really appreciate you as a friend because you're very loyal and hardworking. That's a very specific thing that I can tie to Abena that fits her and not just any friend, if that makes sense. So in a similar light, you want to like do a lot of research on the school website, looking into different clubs. An example is like med mentors. You want to look at different research opportunities. You can look at different research faculty as well and see if you've done similar work in the past or want to do that kind of work in the future. You can look at different tracks. Here at UCLA, we have the global health pathway, of course. And then you can also reference mission alignment. Make sure, because you're going to be writing a lot of these essays, that you use the correct name. A secret other school name can somehow appear in there. It's common, but you can use control find and just kind of search and make sure that it's the same name. So you want to consider how you're also going to benefit the program and kind of the match, and ask yourself when you're writing it, does this fit any medical school or does it fit this specific medical school? Don't talk about too many things. You really just want to do 2 to 3 things. And I advise not to talk about location, weather. Being close to family is important, but I would try to make that as kind of like a side thing if possible. Although I think all of those things are very important. I wouldn't recommend putting them in this prompt.
Also, I'm just gonna add, try to be strategic with these. Like, you don't have to spend a lot of time doing research for a lot of these schools, because again, there's a couple of schools you really want to go to, right? But most of them are there for safety. I remember my prompt, I don't remember exactly, but I remember, for example, I wanted the 2 things that I remember on top of my head was one, doing some sort of mobile clinic, like with the homeless population. And then the other one was doing diabetes research, because that was all of my undergrad. And I remember I would just search that name of that school. Okay, do they have a diabetes center? Find a program they have and literally just copy and paste it into the prompt that I already submitted to 20 different other schools. The same thing for the mobile clinic. Does it have a name? Just copy and paste it, and that's your essay. For a lot of these schools, obviously, but if you really want to go to a school, then I think for those schools specifically, you have to make sure you do more of a research.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Just kind of don't reinvent the wheel, keep using the same themes. And then if you're kind of looking for a third thing to talk about, like if you're involved in mobile clinic and they don't have it at this school, you can even say that you want to start a mobile clinic at the school.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo what Reza said. Yeah, a lot of the top schools have very similar programs. So even with UCLA's global health program, many schools have global health programs. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of really changing the names. And even with location, you definitely don't want to emphasize, oh, like the weather is beautiful, all of that, no. But in terms of patient populations, if you can explain that, the school being located in a certain place, to see you in a unique, like, it gives you a unique opportunity to work with people that whatever, and will help make you a better physician. And you could also contribute to that population in certain ways. Then you could definitely emphasize location in your Y school X essay.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to, I guess, emphasize the fact that like you can like do the research for the school and kind of like write everything like flattering the school and everything like that. But if you're not going to talk about like the experiences that you've had that like fit with like what they have and everything like that, I think that's like really, really important to be like specific about those things. And then I 100% echo what Reza talked about, where like you don't have to make every single school like very unique, because that would be inefficient and it would take up a lot of time. Like just talk about the things that are like really, that you're passionate about, and then like just fit that with every school. And then one thing to, I guess, consider is that like a lot of students really like to come and like say, oh, well, I should use their mission statement, right? Because like, like that will be, I'm using their mission statement. But like most mission statements like sound the same anyway. So I think that like, and also if you use like words from the mission statement, I'm sure that many other pre-meds will also be using words from the mission statement, so it can also just sound redundant over time. So I would say like you can use the mission statement to kind of help you to see like what their focus is, if they are like more primary care, if they're like a research focused, if they're doing all sorts of things. But yeah, you don't have to like copy words from the mission statement.
Yeah, I think mission statement is like a last thing, in my opinion, unless they ask you to specifically comment on how their mission statement might align with you. Okay, so 5 is the optional one. Basically, it asked like, what have you not had a chance to say or elaborate on yet? So an example that I wrote here was, if you feel there's something not addressed in the application that you want us to know about, please feel free to write a brief statement below. So a couple different approaches to this. One thing that I did was, if there was no prompt asking why I wanted to go to that specific school, I would go ahead and write one here. Or if, for example, they didn't have an adversity essay or a diversity essay, I would put mine there. If they had like all of those prompts, I usually would leave it blank. So if there's just nothing super burning for you to write, I didn't write anything, but I'll let the panelists speak about what they did as well.
100% agree. You already have those essays written, and especially if you've done a good job on them, you want a place to put them. Especially if it's going to allow AdCom to learn more about you and your passions and interests. So if they don't have any slot, again, exactly as Michaela said, for some of these really common themes, just put that essay in there. And don't feel compelled to say anything. You don't want to you don't want to sabotage yourself. So if there's really nothing that you can say that will help with your application, don't say anything.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so the scenario situation. So if you were in blank situation, how would you react? One situation that I got was from Virginia Commonwealth University, and they asked like an ethical dilemma that I was seeing like a 15-year-old for cramps, and her mother was with her, but the 15-year-old tells you that she's sexually active and doesn't want you to tell her mother. What do you do? So that's kind of like a classic ethical dilemma. And one thing that I used, was this website right here that Abena will also send in the chat. And it's from UW. And it goes over like every single ethical dilemma in medicine. So you can just read a little bit about the different dilemmas that we face in medical careers, and kind of use that as a springboard to answer these questions. And I think the good thing about that is it's also going to help you with interviews, depending on the type, but it's good to just brush up on that and know about the different themes that come off, like autonomy, consent, end of life care, etc. Panelists, feel free to chip in if you have anything. Sometimes it's not going to be like an ethical dilemma per se. I haven't seen many questions like this. The ones I've seen are usually ethical, but it could be something not in medicine. Like it could be an ethical question about society. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but like if you won the lottery, what would you do with it? Something like that. So it's mainly about how you're going to reason through what you're writing about. All right. Last one could be just an unpredictable prompt. I remember USC had a lot of personality questions. One of them was like, what's the coolest thing you've done recently? And I was just like, I've just been writing secondaries for the past month, and it's COVID. But I wrote, I think, about like hiking a big hike in Yosemite, And again, it's not about the event, it's about how you describe it and kind of like how it impacted you. Anyone have anything to add to that part? Okay. All right, so other questions that you can think about. And again, even if you don't have too much time to sit down at a computer or with pen and paper, you can be thinking about these questions at work or at school and kind of going through in your mind just to be more time efficient, or talking to a friend. So thinking about some rewarding experiences you've had. What are your interests in medicine, teamwork, leadership, and what you've done in your gap year is another typical question. So again, be organized, use your calendar, be realistic. I really recommend taking time off if you can, and I know that's not possible for everyone. I saved enough money to be able to take that 2 weeks off to write my essays. Really advocate for yourself with your bosses, because unfortunately, they're not always interested in your future, although they might say, but they're interested in their business. So they're not going to want you to take time off. But remember that going to medical school is your future, and it's one of your biggest goals that you've probably had for so long. So really just don't feel guilty about staying tied to a job or taking time off if you are able to. And then just use your weekends, pre-writing, and then brainstorm when you can, even when you're not near a computer. So definitely proofread your essays. I like to use Grammarly, which you guys can look up. It's just like an add-on, I think, with Google Chrome, and it's like literally my lifesaver. And it makes like clarification suggestions. It picks up when I miss a period, when I miss a comma. It's amazing. I love it. It doesn't need to be perfect. You have so many essays, so it's kind of just about cranking them out in that 2-week period. So don't delay submitting them just because it's not absolutely perfect. Use your friends, use your mentors, use us. Abena will send the link where you can send your secondaries and we will edit them for free. Make sure that you proofread later or the next day, especially if you're up late. Casper. So I didn't have to take the Casper, but just make sure you look into which schools require this. Basically, you're responding to different prompts. They can be personality-based prompts. They can talk about adversity. They can be ethical prompts. It's honestly like a typing test, because you're going to have to type a lot of things very fast, and you don't get to see your scores. So take that as soon as you can if you have the time, and see which schools require it. There is the AAMC Fee Assistance Program. Abena, if you don't mind sending the link into the chat. I think the requirements are basically if you are eligible for FAFSA when you were in college, if you had like a free lunch assisted program growing up, most people will actually get approved for this. So if you think that you might, I would just look into the different criteria, and it doesn't really hurt to apply if you think you might qualify. And it helps a lot with the costs. So this is basically the conclusion. We'll send in the Google form where you can be matched with an editor at UCLA Medical School. All of our editors are awesome, and we thank them so much for their time. I think this time, panelists, feel free to add anything that you think I missed, and then we'll kind of just go through some of the chat questions.
I'm gonna add one thing real quick to make the process easier for y'all. So again, not for schools that you really want to go to, but for those safety schools, for those schools that you're just trying to add. I'm not sure what part of the application process you are right now. I'm not sure if you've already applied to med schools, but I remember at the time when I was applying, I literally looked at the secondary essays and I was like, okay, I'm going to apply to this med school because I already have these essays written down, or I'm not going to apply because I have to write new essays, and I didn't want to write new essays anymore. I already had a lot of essays written down. So I kind of used the secondaries using the prospective doctors that the link is in the chat. I used that and I was like, okay, I already have essays for this, or the secondaries are easy, so I'm just gonna apply to this school instead of another school. Again, this is only for like safeties or schools that you really don't want to go to, but you're just filling out the number of medical schools that you're trying to apply to.
If you guys have more questions, please go ahead, put them in there, and we'd love to answer them. Someone asked about secondary essay tips specifically for UCLA. Does anyone want to comment on that? I barely even remember mine.
I also don't remember. What are the prompts?
I actually think I might be able to look it up.
Yeah, I don't
Is it-
know what they are.
Stop screen sharing. Actually, real quick, someone asked if we could go back to the Y school X slide. So I'm just gonna go back to that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also,
there's-
sorry, this meeting is being recorded, so.
Yeah. But in case you had a question about this slide, I put up the Y school X slide right here. UCLA, I think it was pretty pretty standard questions. I remember there being an adversity question, a diversity question. I remember the character limit was kind of short for some of them, so it was hard to like trim down and just get to the meat and potatoes. There's also a section where you enter in a bunch of different activities and they give you a lot of room to talk about each activity. Do you guys remember that one? Okay, so you can basically put in your major like extracurriculars and like dive into what you learned from that, like in a full-on essay. So that was something a little bit different. And then they definitely asked about how COVID impacted us. I think the only advice I can give is just, work off of UCLA opportunities here. We have a global health pathway. We have like every single organization you can think of and more every day. Lots of research opportunities. So it should be pretty reasonable to find a good why UCLA answer. Someone asked about if the schools aren't rolling admission, should we still use the 2-week rule? I would say if the interviews are rolling, then yeah, you still want to send them as soon as possible because then the interview slots will get filled up. Okay, we'll probably do like 2 more minutes. And I just wanted to thank the panelists for coming. Thank you, Anthony and Reza and Abena for being my co-host. Reza and Anthony, you guys had awesome advice. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
Happy to be here.
Someone asked if the slides would be available. I know for sure it's recorded. I don't know about the slides. Abena, do you know?
I don't think the slides will be made available, but the recording should be on YouTube. I'll try to figure out where it is on YouTube, and maybe Julia can send like an email blast to the attendees and maybe other premas as well. So
yeah. I don't want to see this YouTube video.
Um,
Does not submitting your secondary within 2 weeks greatly impact your chance at getting interviews?
okay, so you should try to be as fast as possible, but not submitting your secondary within 2 weeks doesn't like rule you out from like receiving an interview to a school. Sometimes some of the secondaries are hard, and you do need to focus on like really providing like quality responses, and maybe you're backlogged and 2 weeks is not enough time. So it's not, you don't have to like die on that cross. If it takes you a little longer, please submit it anyway, and see what happens. It's people evaluating these things, and everything it's a way more subjective process than you would think.
Yeah, I agree with Abena. There are definitely secondaries that I took more than 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. Still got interviews at some of the places that I got at 4 weeks. So like, the 2 week thing is definitely not set in stone. I think it's really about like how early in the process that you submitted. So that's why, there's the recommendation to apply like within 1 or 2 weeks, because of course that just means it's earlier. But that doesn't like, there's no way of telling like, oh, that it will like worsen your chance at anything or anything like that. So yeah, just the earlier the better is really the main message. And of course, not at the expense of quality, as Abena has mentioned.
Yeah, it's like an evolutionary trade-off.
Okay, we have questions. If you got COVID as you were receiving secondaries and this has hindered you turning in secondaries within the 2 week frame, should we be explaining that or just leave it out? Honestly, I think a lot of schools will have like a slot for how has COVID affected you. I don't know that that's something you want to talk about, because I think COVID has affected us in probably more profound ways. But if you want to throw that in there, please. But the 2 week thing is not set in stone. Like, I definitely had schools that I was like a month in still like working on, and I still got interviews, like Anthony was saying. So someone is going to read it, and it's about really like, it's unfortunate to say, like just really like making that connection with the reader. And if it takes you a little longer to do that, again, you're trying to get it in as soon as possible. But if it takes you a little longer, submit it anyway and see what happens.
Is something funny, Abena?
No, the person responded, "Thank you, gives me hope."
Oh, I also was still sharing my screen when I searched cosplay. My bad.
Okay. I think we will wrap this up now. If you guys have any more questions, I think the med mentors, what are they? It's how you set up meetings with people. What is it called?
Yeah, like the counseling. Do we have the link for that?
I don't have the link for that, but if you look up UCLA med mentors counseling, whatever, it will take you to like this peer mentorship portal, and you can like select from a group of like medical students and set up an appointment to chat with them. Maybe sometimes you have to email them to set up the appointment, but I think it's worth it if you have really pressing questions. So
thank you guys, and everyone, good luck. Please reach out if you have questions and send your essays to us so we can help you along your journey.
yeah.
Interview workshops. I think there might be.
It should be probably. We'll see. I'll mention it to Julia. Okay.
All right, thanks for hosting.
Yes.
Wow.
And there's also actually Anthony, please go ahead and thank you so much for being here. There
Recording.